with a podcast.
Hi.
Hi.
We're gonna be doing things a little differently around here.
Yeah. Around these parts.
Well, I didn't have this planned out.
I didn't either, so
I don't know what to tell them.
It's kind of stay tuned.
Stay tuned. This episode's gonna sound a little different, and then stay tuned for a little, not quite an episode, not quite a trailer. She's gonna be real short.
Yeah.
But we're gonna tell you what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when, but soon.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know what?
The future is changing.
Deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll like it. Oh, I hope.
I hope.
Maybe not. But yeah, so this episode's going to be a little different. It's Emma's True Crime Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Take it away, Emma.
All right. So my true crime that I'm going to be sharing with you is a case that almost went unsolved. Before I begin, I would like to add a trigger warning that I will be talking about graphic details that have occurred in the following case. So if you don't like to hear all what happened, we'll see you Friday. So it's 1985 in Michigan, and David Tyll and Brian Ognjan are both 27, and they had been best friends since they were in Boy Scouts together as children. And they grew up around Detroit, Michigan area. On November 22nd, 1985, they planned to go hunting near David's family cabin in White Cloud, Michigan. So David picked up Brian at his home in St. Clair Shores, and Brian cashed a $50 check, and the two of them left for their trip. And they planned to visit a friend in Mayo, Michigan. They knew that going to Mayo, Michigan would add some time, but they wanted to go see their friend. And now the plan was to just be gone for the weekend, so they'd be home on the 24th. David was now married at this time, and Brian had an on and off again girlfriend. The weekend went by, and they never came home. David was driving. It was his vehicle. It was a 1980 black Ford Bronco, and that has never been found. Brian's girlfriend called the police to see if there had been some type of accident, and the police got the vehicle information from the girlfriend, the Bronco, and they haven't had anything pop up, which obviously then concerned everybody because it's been a whole weekend they haven't heard from them. That's when the two were filed as missing. Unfortunately, only David could be filed as missing at the time because Brian's girlfriend tried to do the same for Brian, but they said she wasn't officially family, so she couldn't, so it took a little bit. The investigation started. The check that was cashed was done back in St. Clair Shores. The investigators were looking for witnesses, and it seemed like they just vanished. However, they never arrived at the cabin or the friend's home. Now, David's family's cabin was used quite a bit for hunting and small get-togethers. Well, apparently David's father, his brother's friends were already at the cabin, and they were actually waiting for them. And David called them saying, because of the drive and distance, because obviously they went out of their way to go up north from where they were at. They might not be there till Saturday because of that stop in Mayo. I think it just took a lot longer than they thought. And the family wasn't concerned until Sunday came. But they quickly discarded their concern as well because they were 27 years old. They're adults. Maybe they found something to do instead, and that was more interesting to them. So police were curious if they even made it to Mayo or did something happen there. They eventually found a witness named David Welch that said that they've seen these two men at Walker's Bar. That was on Saturday at 9 or 10 p.m. Now it is said that David Welch, the witness, was heavily drinking, so he wasn't seen as a highly reliable source. But he claimed he talked to the two men, and they were staying at a hotel in the next town over, and that they were going to go hunting as well. They were also looking for women to take back to the hotel, or at least Brian was. The main point that David Welch was making was that the two men said they weren't interested in going to the cabin, but wanted to hang out in the bars. With this information, the family did say that both David and Brian were huge into hunting. They would usually go to be social. And also, I'd like to make a point, like, they didn't have their hunting license. They were going to go get those when they got to the cabin in White Cloud.
Which one is married?
David.
Okay, but Brian still has a long-term girlfriend.
On and off.
Oh, on and off. Okay.
Yeah.
But they were on at the time.
I would assume so.
It's just kind of weird.
She called like, he was missing. I don't know how on and off relationships work because I've never been in one.
Yeah, me neither.
But I don't know if you're on and you find someone else and you're off. But
I don't know. I'm sure for some people, but that kind of sucks though if they really were picking up women, you know.
Mm-hmm. I guess that kind of makes sense if David Welch is telling the truth that they weren't really interested in going to the cabin. Could make sense because they just were trying to find a weekend to hang out. It wasn't necessarily to go hunting.
Right.
The witness, David Welch, said that he offered to take them to another bar that had better luck with women. Brian went with the witness and David stayed behind and continued drinking. When they returned, David had been cut off by the bartender, and so with that, they left the bar. Didn't say if a woman came back, so I'm not sure if Brian was successful.
Just seems fishy.
Yeah. Police still felt David Welch was unreliable. He was heavily drinking. So they didn't know how much to take in consideration for their investigation as a whole.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, the sheriff of the town was hoping to find another witness to back up David Welch's theory. He did talk to the owner of Walker's Bar named Beverly, and she admitted that both Brian and David were there on that Saturday. She was the one that told the bartender to cut David off.
Okay.
And then Beverly said they left the bar at 10 or 11 p.m. Beverly said they were also there on Sunday. Police never heard this piece of information this entire time.
That's interesting.
And she even had a piece of evidence that she didn't know was a huge deal at the time, but she had a flannel jacket that was left behind that she believed David was wearing. And that's all she knew. All we had was they were there Friday, called the dad or whoever they called at the cabin. They're not going to be there till Saturday. Well, Saturday's there, and they were there all day drinking.
Right.
So I don't know if they really had any plans. I think maybe what the dad said, which I guess in reality he would know his son if that was common, of him being like, well, this sounds more fun, so I'm not going to show up, sorry.
I mean,
I don't know.
I wouldn't want to go hunting either.
Me either. I'm not a hunter. I've never been hunting, but no thanks. Which is kind of interesting that we have 2 different time frames. But that definitely, if it's 11 p.m., if that's what Beverly is saying, they're not going to the cabin.
Well, even if it was like 9 and they had been drinking so long.
Well, yeah, and the plan was they're coming home Sunday.
Yeah.
Now we have a piece of evidence that they were there. Police then were called by another employee at a different bar called the Linkers Bar. And a woman named Cindy said that it was Saturday night when she served them. The bar was super busy, and she normally wouldn't remember the faces at the bar, especially if it was a busy night, but she remembered the 2 of them because apparently Brian left to go to the bathroom, and David paid for their drinks while he was gone. Brian came back upset because he wanted to pay for them, and he didn't want David paying for it.
Yeah.
And Brian jokingly told Cindy that if she took David's money, he would have to kill her. But Brian was drunk, so it came off quite aggressive. Like, I'm sure he'd be like, I'm going to have to kill you. But it's like, I think when you're drunk, you're not thinking what you're saying, but it was aggressive.
Yeah.
So Cindy called over her manager, owner, and after they talked to them, there was no fighting of any kind. They just left. So all investigators had was that David and Brian went to a bunch of bars and then they just disappeared.
Yeah.
That's all that's left of them.
Weird.
And a lot of false tips came to them. People who said they saw them in White Cloud, but of course they were saying this in front of TV cameras. So investigators believe that David and Brian never made it out of Mayo, Michigan.
Right.
That is where we're at now.
Okay.
A month later, another witness came forward. And this witness was named Larry Barker. And he said the 2 men pulled into his driveway in a black Ford Bronco asking for directions. Larry knew that they came in the evening, but unfortunately he couldn't remember if it was Friday or Saturday. He said they have been drinking. They asked him about a type of gun and that they were going hunting. But Larry didn't realize that these were the 2 men that were going to be missing until he saw it on the news a month later. But that's all that Larry knew.
Yeah.
These tips they're really sporadic or they're false.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we really don't know what happened to these 2 guys. So the next year, another witness came forward saying he saw hunters on his property around this time. They were in a Bronco, but there were 4 men, not 2. And he told them to leave. And he was brought in to identify if it was the same Bronco, and the man said it wasn't the same one he saw that night. At this time, both David and Brian were believed to be deceased. And these families of David and Brian were so close to just giving up hope because every tip that came in were either false or they never led them to their remains. A theory that was tossed around was that maybe they drove off the road into the water. So they hired a helicopter to conduct a search, just seeing if they could find any clue. And since that 1 year mark, both David and Brian didn't use their credit cards, health insurance, social security numbers since the weekend trip. But it wasn't believed they just ran away. It just seemed out of character for them.
Yeah.
But anyway, they couldn't find anything in the water either. So they were kind of dismissing that theory.
Yeah.
A $100,000 reward was released to the public, and the family just hoped someone would come forward because no one just goes missing. True. I think that was their main point. But anyone that would come forward, it wasn't like useless information by any means, because we always think like we should say something if you know something. But it didn't help them find what they were looking for. So it's not useless information. It was very helpful that we know that they might have stopped and talked to Larry and asked them directions. So we kind of know their whereabouts, but it didn't give them
information
where to go from.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so where'd they go from here? It's a driveway. It doesn't tell them anything. So investigators had pilots search the area on land, water. They had divers. They went through 3 generations of detectives because of how long this case went unsolved.
Wow.
And no one knew anything.
That's crazy.
At this time, David's wife was able to file a divorce, and she ended up remarrying. 15 years later, another tip comes in from a man named Daniel. It's now the year 2000. He said that he believed that he heard a confession from the killer's mouths.
Ooh.
Daniel told them that these 2 men said that they killed these 2 guys. They were hunters, which has been the thing. Even though I will say is kind of weird, because the whole story we keep on hearing is that they're not going hunting.
Right.
Clearly, they're not going hunting if they're at the bar at 11 o'clock p.m. on Saturday and supposed to come home on Sunday. That was their identification, was that the hunters.
Okay.
That they killed these 2 guys with a hatchet in front of a bar and then put them in a river.
Oh my God.
The names were Dennis and Artie Mahay. They were brothers from the area. They killed David and Brian because they were mouthy. And Daniel said he saw the black Ford Bronco multiple times, and that this wasn't the only murders he knew about. But that's all that Daniel told them. So police are searching for Dennis and Artie, but they couldn't find anyone with those names, almost like they didn't exist probably. As they were searching the town, they're looking for Dennis and Artie, they kept hearing about some brothers who were known to be not the nicest people in the world. Their names were Raymond and Donald Duvall. A lot of people have come back saying that maybe Daniel was trying to tell them something, but not giving it away, which you'll find out later. And they belonged to a gang that consisted of their 7 brothers. Raymond and Donald were very close. They would go to the bars a lot, fight with anyone they met. It was said they lived in cabins and trailers in the woods, and they would often hunt for their food. They stole to survive, and their main source of income was selling stolen car parts. And it was said that their ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, and current girlfriends were terrified of them. Investigators in the area said if it involved the Duvall brothers, you should probably call for backup.
Ooh.
That's how they were known in this town.
Damn.
So stories of the Duvalls spread that claim the Duvalls said that they killed both Brian and David, but they weren't thrown into the river. They fed their remains to their pigs.
Oh, fuck. I knew you were going to say something creepy like that.
There was a call from Linker's bar of a bar fight, but the patrol officer didn't go because usually bar fights were solved amongst themselves. And it wasn't like they kept that secret to themselves for a while. In 1994, this is related, kind of. It'll make sense in a minute, so just hang tight, listeners. In 1994, it was discovered that one of Raymond's ex-girlfriends, who was the mother of 2 of his children, was murdered. Her name was Eileen, and during her trial, Raymond testified that her husband Nelson murdered her, and Raymond's friend Robert agreed with him. Police had to look into Raymond and Robert, though, because it was discovered that Eileen's body had been dumped in the middle of the road outside of Raymond's house, and he was driving around the body, continuously running her over. But both Raymond and Robert were cleared, and Nelson was convicted of Eileen's murder. The defense believed Raymond killed Eileen because she knew about the hunter's murder and was going to come forward with the information. At this time, investigators really needed a witness that saw the fight between the Duvall brothers and David and Brian. Just something that would lead them to any evidence or real information. It wasn't going to be easy because this entire town, including investigators, were terrified of the Duvalls, and they really thought their lives would be endangered. A lot of people thought that Daniel was just making up two names because he didn't want to give away, but it would lead them to the discovering he might be talking about these Duvall brothers that kept coming up. But that's not confirmed. But that is a theory people thought as they looked into this case a little bit more. Like, maybe he was trying to say something, but like, please don't kill me. Eventually, a witness was found. The witness was placed under police protection, and it was said to keep the family out of it. And the witness saw two men being killed by the Duvall brothers. The Duvall brothers were arrested on May of 2003, 18 years after the two men went missing. The trial started, and our star witness, Barbara Boudreau, told the truth. She said at the time she lived a mile away from Linker's bar. She and a friend went to the bar that Sunday night, and both David and Brian entered. One of them rubbed up against Barbara inappropriately, and Barbara told them off. And they left them alone. And then Raymond and Donald and the youngest brother, Rex, entered. They were acting kind of nasty. They started to pick a fight, and she called the police that they were fighting. She said that Rex left the bar and came back with a friend, and her friend were scared, so they just left to walk back home. She figured, I called the police, told them there was a fight. It's out of my hands now. So they were at her house when they heard screaming from outside, and someone was asking for help. They snuck outside, behind bushes, and they heard a man say, "You are dead." And they heard the sound of metal hitting something. Ugh. And she saw a Bronco and a pickup truck, though. And David was being beaten. Donald hit David with a metal bat, and he hit him so hard that his head exploded. And Brian had to watch his friend be brutally murdered. Oh my God. And it was said that Brian peed himself, and the brothers laughed at him for it and then murdered Brian as well. The two women ran inside, and they were so scared they just wanted to protect themselves. A few minutes later, she heard a knock on the door. She opened it, and it was the Duvall brothers. They told her they knew her family. She was to say nothing. She saw nothing, and they left it with the pigs have to eat too. Barbara and her friend, when they left, they put the bodies in the back of the Bronco, drove off. They actually followed them. They kept their distance so they would be caught. And they came back a little later. They passed where they saw them turn, came back a little later to a clearing that had so much blood. But there were no bodies. And the Bronco was taken apart in the garage. So we're assuming at that point, as what they do for a living, they sold the Bronco parts, which probably will suggest why we never found it. She said she tried to come forward, but she was so scared. She had two of her dogs killed anytime she tried to talk. She just kept her mouth shut. But she changed her mind with a new detective, and she didn't want the reward money. But because Barbara spoke up, the town came forward, and several other witnesses reported that Duvalls bragged about killing David and Brian, cutting them up and feeding their remains to their pigs. And these witnesses were also apparently threatened into silence. Another witness, the girlfriend of Raymond's son, also came forward in 2003. She said that Raymond had bragged to her that he and Donald had killed the hunters over a dispute about a deer. He also told her that he had put the bodies through a wood chipper and fed the remains to the pigs. He threatened to do the same to her if she left his son. Yet another witness, Donald's girlfriend at the time, said in 1986 he confessed to killing the hunters. He then beat her and threatened to kill her if she told anyone. She and the two other witnesses also said the Duvall brother, Rex, was driving the victim's Bronco a few days after the murders. So another Duvall brother claimed that he didn't kill them, but helped transport the victims' bodies. Police suspect that yet another Duvall brother, Kenny, had scrapped the hunter's vehicle and sold the parts. They think that was the brother that did it. He told the police that in a taped interview, but had courtroom amnesia while on stand. In October 2003, Raymond and Donald went on trial for the murders. Both took the stand, denied being involved, claiming that they would never met the victims. They were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Neither David nor Brian's remains have ever been found. However, as recently as 2009, police have received tips about the possible location of their remains. Based on Barbara's statements, investigators also believe that at least 3 other men were involved in the attack on the hunters. However, no one else has been charged. They're still wondering to this day whether or not all the Duvall brothers were involved in this. It's closed with the 2 brothers. I think they were the main ones that really did most of it. Yeah. But it's kind of closed, kind of not.
Yeah.
Because they don't know who else was involved.
Right.
And that's the story.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what it kind of makes me think of is like how many people die every year because of like road rage. You know, like you just never know. Because it said that they were being a little mouthy, right? And it's like
that we know of, maybe.
Guys kind of get like that sometimes. Not condoning that behavior. Not like saying like that's fine. But
No.
you never think like, oh, these people would brutally murder me and feed me to pigs if you're just kind of mouthy.
Well, and here's the thing. We don't even know if that's true, though.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't know that that's true because the Duvall
been
brothers are
unprovoked.
known to just fight with anyone. Obviously, we can't change what the past was and that kind of stuff, but it would have been so nice that if David or Brian, one of them or both, would have reached out to the family saying, hey, we're not going to make it to the cabin, we're going to be here, because they didn't know about where their location was the entire time.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, it's crazy to me too that like these brothers like ran this town like so much that even the cops were scared of them. It's like, you're a cop. Mm-hmm. You know, go do your cop job.
And I think it's kind of crazy because though I don't know any family that is this intense that controls a town, I think we all know some in our own hometowns where it's like, if something did happen, how easily, one, they might get off and get away with it if they got in trouble. Yeah. And we've seen it happen multiple times.
No one should be above the law. It doesn't matter who you are, your power, or anything like that. I see it a lot in small towns, too.
Yep. And this is a very small town. Yeah. So. But also, it's, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's fascinating, but I don't know, I just can't fathom that 15 years go by and you just couldn't say anything because you're that terrified. Yeah. But yeah, I would be too.
I mean, if I saw somebody get their freaking head bashed in, exploded, and then the guy came to my door, I'd be scared. But I also think that there are things that maybe could have been done.
Well, I think so too.
But I just don't want to say like, I don't want to say it's like victim blaming because she wasn't. She was kind of a victim. I mean, she was threatened, but...
Oh, yeah, she was. She had two of her dogs scary, killed. But... Yeah, no, it would be nice if the community could have kind of come together. Yeah. And would have been like, no, this is still wrong. 2 people are missing. And the whole town knew about it. That was the thing. Yeah. And it wasn't until Barbara spoke up that the whole town was like, yep, we know what happened to them. Yep, you're right. This did happen.
I'm glad that their family has some sort of closure. I mean, they don't have the body or anything.
I don't think they'll ever find the bodies at this point.
God, that one was pretty messed up.
But I felt like it was really important to talk about.
Yeah.
Because of how many people...
See something, say something.
Yeah, but also just like how trusting some people are. And I'm not saying there's like zero like good in the world. I think that's a very negative way of thinking. Yeah. Because I do think there is some good. But
someone out there.
But I just feel like going away with somebody, I think that's what always kind of scares me because I know it's not related, but it is. It's like people that trust on Tinder dates or anything. I'm like, do you know them? Yeah. Do you actually know them? Because I'm sure these 2 men that just ran into these 2, they didn't think they were going to get brutally murdered either. But you see it a lot, like people going missing, and so many people are so embarrassed to say, oh, I met them on Tinder. So then they just go with them secretly and don't tell anybody. And that's my point. I think just to relate it, as your takeaway, to relate it to now, because it's not 85 anymore. Yeah. But if you're going to go meet somebody or you're going to a place that you're not sure of, tell someone you're going there. Don't just go there. I'm not saying all of them are bad. I've known a lot of people that get married from them, but
I did.
Also, but you got married from. But also, like
I never met anyone in public. And Jacob was always at home. Like if someone came over, right? Which sounds kind of weird, but yeah.
But it's not weird. That's what I mean. But that's like, exactly what I'm talking about.
If like I ever went to meet somebody, I'd have a friend go with me. Like I've never. People can be capable of anything. Like you don't know.
I think just being more aware of the situation. But that's even like, well, another one, door dashing. Yeah. You have to be aware of your
I get scared sometimes when I go by myself.
I don't want to always say you live in fear, but at least be aware of your surroundings.
It's also kind of the world we live in. Yeah, so, like you just have to be aware. You have to. Because ignorance isn't always bliss. You know, you can't just pretend everything's...
And I think what I've learned throughout my time of like even doing this podcast, but also just listening to true crime, it's not just now. And I don't like when people say that. It's like, this is 1985 and the same thing happened. Yeah. And it's like, but if I said it was 2022, I said this happened, you'd be like, oh, the people these days. And it's like, you wouldn't know though, because nothing has changed. Yeah. Just be aware. Yeah. And tell people where you're at. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and you know, we never want to like victim blame or say these guys were, you know, it's their fault for not doing any of these things.
No,
it's just,
not at
this
all.
is something you can take into your own
Yes.
personal life and instill. Just tell people where you are.
Mm-hmm. Because it's really unfortunate what they were just looking for a fun weekend, which is so common. Like, this isn't something out of the blue by any means, and that happened to them.
It's horrible.
And it went unsolved for 18 years.
Yeah. We hope you guys enjoyed that. We hope you guys learned something from that episode.
Yeah.
Until then,
we'll see you Friday.
Be aware, please. Mm-hmm. See you Friday.